Many dice used in modern casinos have sharp right-angled edges, while most dice around us have rounded corners. Why this difference? Is it theoretically true that right-angled dice are more statistically fair than rounded dice? The answer is no. If you try searching for this topic online, you'll find many people claiming that right-angled dice produce more random results, especially manufacturers of right-angled dice. Experience tells us not to believe everything we say, so you'll probably do what I did and look for relevant experiments and papers. And I actually found some. David Nicole Loria, a man who must have had the same confusion as us, bought two dice from the same manufacturer to conduct an experiment, one with rounded corners and one with the sharp right-angled edges commonly used in casinos. Why only two? Perhaps because these dice are really expensive. He analyzed their probability distribution by rolling them extensively and recording the numbers they landed on. He actually found that the rounded die was indeed less accurate than the right-angled die, showing a clear directional bias, with the most and least frequent rolls reaching 5.1%. Unfortunately, he eventually discovered that the difference didn't stem from the difference between rounded and right angles, but rather from the precision of the manufacturing process. The spacing between the faces of the rounded die was uneven. Therefore, he deduced that rounded dice had higher manufacturing precision. Their mathematical probabilities should also be balanced. It seems that what truly affects the fairness of a die's probabilities is the manufacturing process typically used for rounded and right angles. I researched this and learned that casinos use dice called precision dice, a rather chaotic process where a corner is rounded more or less, it's entirely random, and each die could potentially be a lucky or a cursed die. Of course, this doesn't mean rounded corners can't be precisely manufactured. We can certainly create a perfectly fair rounded die using cutting or other methods similar to those used for right-angled dice. But the interesting point is that even if we could create a perfect, absolutely balanced rounded die, casinos would likely still choose right-angled dice. This is because mathematical probability balance doesn't guarantee true fairness in a casino environment. Imagine if one type of die was easier to manipulate than another. Any mathematical equality of probability would immediately become meaningless. Slippery dice is an ancient and effective method of controlling dice, achieved by using a specific throwing technique to make the die slide without flipping, thus controlling the number of points. At a gambling table, a die with rounded edges makes sliding even easier, working much like the curve at the front of a sled or snowboard. Of course, casinos have many ways to prevent this slippery cheating. For example, in this game, players need to throw the die across the entire table and hit a pyramid-shaped rubber barrier on the opposite end for a valid throw, which already significantly increases the difficulty of controlling the dice. But a die with sharp right angles in a felt gambling table environment would theoretically introduce even more unpredictable flips, further increasing the difficulty of controlling the dice. This means that choosing a sharp right-angled die is not about getting closer to the mathematical 1/6, but rather about getting closer to an outcome beyond human control for its chaotic nature. After all, the ideal of a die is a random number generator, but in reality, it is always a physical entity held in a person's hand. As long as it's a physical entity, it's always governed by its initial conditions. I don't know if you've heard of the concept of Laplace's demon. It's said that if it possessed all the information